The first message came on a Tuesday morning, just after 8. I was at the kitchen table with my tea cooling beside the newspaper, the same way I start most days now. The house was quiet, the sort of quiet you notice more as you get older, because there is less to interrupt it. My phone buzzed once, then went still. I do not rush to it the way I used to. At my age, very few messages arrive that truly require speed. Most things I have learned can sit for a moment. They will not spoil. When I finally picked it up, I saw my daughter's name. It surprised me, not because we were on bad terms exactly, but because we had not been on any terms at all for some time. Not openly. Not honestly. We had spoken in the careful way people speak when they are trying not to touch a sore spot. Her message was short. "Hi, Dad. I've been thinking about you. I hope you're doing okay. I'd like us to move forward if we can." I read it twice, then once more, slower. Move forward. It is a pleasant phrase. It sounds like sunlight on a cold floor. It sounds like someone opening a window. It sounds like a person offering a hand. And yet, as I sat there with my tea and my quiet kitchen, I felt something tighten in my chest. Not from emotion, but from recognition. Like seeing a familiar shape in the distance and already knowing what it is. I typed back a simple reply. I told her I was well enough. I asked how she was. I said it would be good to talk. She answered within minutes, as if she had been holding her phone in her hand, waiting for the small relief of my response. "That would mean a lot," she wrote. "Life is too short. I don't want us holding on to the past." Holding on to the past. That was the second phrase. I did not argue with it. I have lived long enough to know that time does not reverse, and nothing truly disappears. We carry our years the way we carry our bones. They might ache, but they are still ours. Still, I found myself staring at the words, trying to decide what she meant by them. People say the past when they do not want to name something. The past is a convenient container. You can put anything in it and seal the lid. I set the phone down and went about my day. I watered the plants on the veranda. I folded the washing. I made myself a sandwich. I tried to let it sit lightly in my mind, the way you let a thought drift by without chasing it. But in the afternoon, another message arrived. This time, it was from my son. "Hey, Dad," he wrote. "Hope you're all right. I've been meaning to reach out. I think we should clear the air. I'm tired of the distance. Can we let this go? Can we let this go?" That made 3. I stared at the screen longer than I meant to. It is an odd experience, seeing the same idea arrive from 2 different people within a single day, dressed in different words but carrying the same weight. I read his message again, slowly, paying attention not just to what he said, but what he did not say. Clear the air. Let this go. Move forward. Not once did either of them mention what we were moving forward from. If I was meant to know, then it was being treated like something understood between us. If I was not meant to know, then it was being treated like something I should accept without question. I answered my son as I had answered my daughter. Calmly, briefly. I told him I was fine. I said we could talk. I asked when suited him. He replied quickly. "Soon," he said. "I just don't want this hanging over the family anymore. It isn't healthy for any of us. Any of us." I noticed that too. Not long after that, my sister called. My younger sister, though we are both old now, and younger is only a technical distinction. Her voice was gentle, almost practiced. "I've been thinking," she said, after asking about my health. "We all have. We'd love it if you could come to Sunday lunch. Just a simple meal, no tension, no digging into things. We just want peace." Peace. It sounded like another version of the same request, and I felt that tightening again, that quiet recognition. Not anger, not sorrow, just the sense of a pattern forming in front of me, as clear as a set of footprints. "I don't know," I said. "It's been a while." That's why, she replied. You can't stay shut away forever. We're all getting older. None of us has time for grudges. Forgiveness is for you too, you know. There it was, said plainly at last. Forgiveness. I did not answer right away. I held the phone against my ear and listened to my sister breathe, waiting for me to agree. What struck me most in that moment was not the word itself, but the way it was offered, as if it were a gift they were trying to place in my hands. Forgiveness, presented neatly, without context, like a solution before the problem was spoken aloud. I agreed to Sunday lunch. That may sound like concession, but at the time it felt more like observation. I wanted to see how this would unfold, this careful choreography of words that seemed to be happening around me. When I arrived, nothing appeared unusual. The house smelled of roasted vegetables and warm bread. The table was set with the good plates, the ones that only come out for occasions that are meant to feel reassuring. My daughter hugged me a little longer than usual. My son clapped me on the shoulder, solid and familiar. My sister smiled in that way that suggests relief before anything has actually been resolved. We sat, we ate, we spoke about ordinary things. The weather, a neighbor's new fence, a friend who had moved north. My health was asked about several times, each inquiry gentle, almost careful, as though my answer might crack something if it came out wrong. Then, halfway through the meal, my daughter reached for her glass and cleared her throat. "I'm really glad you're here," she said. "It feels good to have everyone together again." Everyone nodded. My son murmured agreement. My sister smiled at her plate. "It's important," my daughter continued, "that we don't stay stuck. Life moves on whether we like it or not." There it was again, the idea hovering politely above the table. I waited. My son leaned forward, resting his elbows near his plate. "We just don't want things to be awkward anymore," he said. "None of us benefits from that." I looked at him then, properly. He did not meet my eyes for long. "What things?" I asked. The question was simple. It was not raised. It was not sharp. It was just a question. A pause followed, a small one, but noticeable. My sister filled it quickly. "Oh, you know," she said. "Everything, old stuff, misunderstandings. It doesn't matter now." Doesn't matter now. I nodded slowly, not because I agreed, but because I was listening. "I suppose," I said, "it matters if it still affects how we speak to one another." My daughter smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "That's why we're talking," she said, "so we can put it behind us." Put what behind us? No one answered that. Instead, my son spoke again, his voice softer this time. "Dad, holding on to things just weighs you down. You deserve peace." I noticed the phrasing immediately. You deserve peace. Not we owe you clarity. Not we need to explain. Just peace. Something passive. Something that asked nothing of them except my acceptance. Over the next few days, the messages continued. A text from my sister. "I hope you felt the love on Sunday. Let's not undo progress by revisiting hurt." An email from my daughter. "I really believe forgiveness is a gift you give yourself." A call from my son. "We can't change the past. We can only choose how much power we give it." Each message carried the same shape. Soft edges, gentle tone. Not one of them contained a single concrete reference to what had caused the distance in the first place. It was as if we were standing around an empty chair, all agreeing it should be moved, without acknowledging why it had been placed there. When I asked small questions, they slid away from them. "What exactly are we forgiving?" I asked my daughter one evening, my voice calm. She laughed lightly. "Oh, Dad," she said, "it doesn't need to be dissected. That just keeps wounds open." With my son, I tried again. "If we're clearing the air," I said, "it helps to know what's in it." He sighed, the sound of a man tired of a conversation he believed should already be over. "You're overthinking this," he replied. "We're all just trying to move on." Move on, always forward, never inward, never backward, never specific. It became clear, slowly and unmistakably, that forgiveness was being presented not as a response to something acknowledged, but as a preventative measure, a way to close a door without looking inside the room. And the more gently they spoke, the more pressure I felt, not to forgive, but to comply. Because refusal, in this arrangement, would make me the only one holding something that everyone else insisted no longer existed. I began to understand that what was being asked of me was not reconciliation. It was silence. Once I noticed the pattern, I could not unsee it. Every conversation followed the same path. Warm opening, concern for my well-being, a careful reminder that time was passing. Then the gentle nudge toward forgiveness, always framed as something beneficial to me, never as something that required anything further from them. What never appeared was a sentence that began with, "We did," or "I said," or "I took." Language matters. I spent my working life negotiating contracts and reading correspondence, and you develop an ear for what is being avoided. Here, avoidance was not clumsy. It was polished. When I asked direct questions, the answers came back rounded and smooth, like stones worn by water. "What exactly are we talking about?" I asked my sister during a quiet afternoon call. She hesitated just long enough for me to hear it. "Oh, nothing specific," she said. "Just old tensions. Everyone played a part." Everyone played a part. It was a remarkable phrase. Perfectly balanced, perfectly empty. When I pressed a little further, she changed the subject to my health, then to the weather, then to whether I was still driving at night. With my daughter, the redirection was softer. "You've always been strong," she told me, "but you don't need to carry everything alone." I wondered briefly what she thought I was carrying. She never said. My son was more impatient. "Why do you need it spelled out?" he asked one evening. "You know what families are like." I did know what families are like. I had spent decades being part of one. That was precisely why the absence of words felt so loud. Gradually, the tone shifted. The requests became more frequent. The reassurance began to sound rehearsed. The concern for my well-being took on an edge, subtle but unmistakable. "You seem stuck," my sister said once. "I worry about you." "You don't sound happy," my daughter wrote. Holding on to resentment changes people. My son was more direct. "This can't be good for you," he said. "At your age, stress is dangerous." At your age. There it was again. Time, not as a shared reality, but as leverage. I started to hear an accusation beneath the kindness. If I did not forgive, then I was choosing bitterness. If I did not let it go, then I was harming myself. If I asked questions, then I was the one preventing peace. No one ever said this outright. They did not need to. It was implied in every careful phrase. One afternoon, after another phone call that left me feeling oddly hollow, I sat alone and went back over the years in my mind. Not searching for drama, but for clarity. There were moments I could point to, decisions made without me, documents I had been asked to sign quickly, conversations that changed when I entered a room, the slow shift from inclusion to notification. At the time, I had noticed, but I had trusted. Trust has a way of smoothing over irregularities. You tell yourself there is a reasonable explanation. You assume goodwill where none has been confirmed. What struck me now was not a single event, but the way those events had never been acknowledged. Not then, not now. The insistence on forgiveness, I began to realize, was not about healing a relationship. It was about sealing it. Once forgiven, the past could not be questioned without appearing cruel. Forgiveness, offered without admission, becomes a barrier. It stops inquiry. It closes accounts without showing the ledger. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that silence was not an oversight. It was the condition. The understanding settled in quietly. There was no moment of shock, no sudden revelation, just a gradual alignment of things that had not quite fit before. Words lining up with timing, tone matching behavior, concern arriving precisely where explanation was absent. I began to hear the requests differently. When my daughter spoke about moving forward, I heard the careful avoidance of standing still long enough to be questioned. When my son talked about letting things go, I heard the desire to ensure nothing was picked up and examined. When my sister spoke of peace, I heard the wish for quiet, not resolution. Forgiveness in their hands was not an act of repair. It was a mechanism. I noticed how often practical matters were mentioned alongside these appeals. Not directly, never bluntly, but close enough to feel intentional. A remark about estate planning, a casual reference to paperwork already sorted, a reassurance that everything's taken care of, said with a smile that assumed agreement. Once, my son said, "We don't need lawyers involved. Families should be able to trust each other." It was said kindly, but it landed with weight. Trust, I had learned, is often invoked most urgently when it is about to be tested. I asked gently what he meant. "Oh, nothing," he replied quickly. "Just general stuff. You know, it's better if things stay simple." Simple for whom? I wondered. There were moments when I could almost see the outline of what was being protected. Not details, not figures, but consequences. The kind that follow admissions. The kind that create records, or invite scrutiny, or shift narratives in ways that cannot be undone. It explained the language, the softness, the insistence that specifics were unnecessary, even harmful. Specifics create accountability. And accountability, once introduced, has a way of spreading. I thought back to the Sunday lunch, to the way my daughter had cleared her throat before speaking, to the way my son had avoided my eyes, to the way my sister had rushed to smooth over the smallest pause. None of them had looked relieved. Not truly. They had looked cautious, as if walking across a surface they hoped was solid, but were not certain would hold. In the weeks that followed, the pressure became steadier. "If something's bothering you, you should talk to someone," my daughter suggested. "A counselor might help you let go." "I don't want you isolated," my sister said. "This distance isn't healthy." My son said nothing for a while, then sent a message late one evening. "We're worried," he wrote. "Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." Harder for whom? That was the question they never asked and never wanted me to answer. What I saw then, clearly and without bitterness, was that my forgiveness had a function. It was not emotional. It was structural. If I forgave, the matter would be closed without being defined. If I forgave, nothing further would be required. If I forgave, the story could end where they wanted it to. And if I did not, then I became the problem. Not because I was angry, not because I was loud, but because I was still listening. I did not announce my decision. There was no speech, no confrontation, no list of grievances read aloud in a steady voice. That sort of thing belongs to other stories, and I had no interest in performing one. Instead, I changed my behavior. When messages arrived asking if I was ready to move on, I replied politely, but without affirmation. When forgiveness was mentioned, I acknowledged the sentiment without accepting it. When invitations came wrapped in reassurance, I declined without explanation. "I'm not up for that right now," became my most common phrase. It confused them. Confusion came first, then irritation, carefully disguised as concern. My daughter asked if she had upset me. My sister asked if something was wrong. My son asked, more bluntly, what I wanted. "What I want," I said to him once, after a long pause, "is clarity." There was silence on the line. A long one. "About what?" he asked finally. You know, I replied. He exhaled, slow and controlled. Why does it matter? He said. Why can't you just accept that we're trying to make things right? That word again. Right. Undefined, but assumed. I can't forgive what hasn't been named, I said. That wouldn't be forgiveness. It would be something else. He did not argue. He did not explain. He ended the call soon after, politely, as if the conversation had reached a natural stopping point. After that, the tone shifted again. The warmth cooled. The frequency of contact decreased. When they did reach out, it was brief, factual, cautious. Updates instead of invitations. Information instead of emotion. It confirmed what I already understood. Access had been conditional. As long as I was moving in the direction they wanted, closeness was encouraged. Once I stopped, distance returned, not dramatically, but efficiently. I did not feel angry about it. Anger requires energy, and I no longer waste mine on things that reveal themselves so clearly. What I felt instead was a kind of calm resolve. By withholding forgiveness, I was not punishing them. I was simply declining to participate in an arrangement that required my silence in exchange for belonging. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse. I did not demand explanations that would never come willingly. I just stepped back. I answered less. I shared less. I stopped filling the gaps they left open with my own assumptions. And in that quiet withdrawal, I learned something important. They did not miss me. They missed the version of me that made things easier. Time did what it always does when no one interferes with it. It widened the distance. Weeks passed, then months. There were birthdays marked by short messages, holidays acknowledged with neutral words. The rituals remained, but the substance was gone. No one asked again for forgiveness. That, more than anything, told me I had chosen correctly. If forgiveness had truly been about repair, the conversation would have continued. There would have been effort, however uncomfortable. Instead, once it became clear that forgiveness would not be given on demand, the subject vanished entirely. So did the urgency. I thought often about how easily it had all quieted down, how quickly concern gave way to acceptance when the outcome could no longer be steered. There is a particular kind of peace that comes from understanding the shape of a thing at last. Not peace as comfort, but peace as clarity. I was no longer confused by their words. I no longer searched conversations for hidden meanings. I no longer wondered what I might be missing. I had stopped supplying what they needed. Forgiveness, without admission, had been the final transaction. Once it was declined, there was nothing left to negotiate. I did not block them. I did not announce boundaries. I simply allowed the relationship to settle where it naturally fell once my compliance was removed. It settled thin. I spent more time alone, but it did not feel like loneliness. It felt like quiet reclaimed. I returned to old habits, morning walks, long books, meals eaten slowly. Sometimes I thought about what would happen if one of them did speak plainly. If a message arrived that said, "This is what we did," or "This is what I need to own." I was not opposed to that possibility, but I no longer waited for it. Waiting creates leverage for the person who knows you are waiting. I had given that up. What surprised me most was not their silence, but my own steadiness within it. I had expected grief, perhaps regret. What I felt instead was a clean absence of obligation. Forgiveness, I realized, is not something owed simply because time has passed. It is not a requirement for being considered reasonable. It is not a courtesy extended to preserve appearances. It is a response. And responses, to mean anything, require truth to respond to. Without that, withholding forgiveness was not an act of cruelty. It was the only honest thing left to do. I do not know how the story is told on their side. I imagine it is simple. A father who grew distant, an old man who could not let go, a silence that appeared without explanation. Stories have a way of smoothing themselves when details are inconvenient. I am not part of that version, and I do not need to correct it. What I know is this. Forgiveness was asked for before anything was admitted because admission would have changed the balance. It would have introduced consequences that could not be managed with tone or timing. It would have required something of them beyond words. They wanted absolution without exposure. They wanted closure without cost. They wanted the comfort of resolution while keeping the protection of ambiguity. By refusing quietly, I denied them that structure. I did not accuse them of wrongdoing. I did not force a reckoning they were unprepared to face. I simply removed myself from the role I had been assigned. That role was not father or brother or confidant. It was buffer. It was witness without voice. It was the person whose silence allowed everything else to remain undisturbed. Once I understood that, there was nothing left to argue. Forgiveness is not a moral obligation imposed by age or blood. It is not a shortcut to peace. It is not something that can be demanded as proof of goodwill. It is something that follows honesty, not something that replaces it. I have made my peace with the distance. It is not punishment. It is alignment. I live now without the constant pressure to interpret, excuse, or absorb what is left unsaid. My days are quieter, but they are my own. If one day a message arrives that names things clearly, I will read it. I will listen. I will decide then what response is deserved. Until that day, my refusal stands, not as defiance, but as truth. Silence, when chosen deliberately, can be a form of integrity. And integrity, I have learned, is worth more than reconciliation built on avoidance.